you ever felt stuck, wondering why you can't seem to follow through? Maybe thinking something is wrong with you, and really just wanting to move forward, considering if real change is even possible? Hello, and welcome to Books to Better Your Life. If those are questions on your mind, this is the podcast for you. I'm Anne Brinkman with Better Your Life Coaching. I'm a personal growth book junkie who loves sharing my latest reads with you so you can be inspired to make change in your life. I share my takeaways from a self-development, wellness, or psychology book, then tell you how I put them into practice, and then give you a challenge to take on when you're ready. I also interview up-and-coming self-development and wellness authors to get their take on the best action-oriented and behavior change skills you can use to tackle life's challenges. Ready for change? Let's dig in. Today we have a special guest, Michelle Gruening. From Walt Disney World to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, Michelle is a living example of what happens when you stop making excuses and start taking action. Through 20 years in leadership roles across industries, from Disney's fairytale weddings to scaling a global software company, she discovered that professional success doesn't always equal personal fulfillment. She has taken her decades of experience leading people and created a coaching philosophy rooted in tough love, mindset mastery, and taking action. Michelle has now self-published her first activity book titled Stop Doomscrolling to help people break free from their phone addiction and get back to living their life with mindfulness, intention, and joy. Hi, Michelle. I'm so delighted to have you here. And I want to be the first to admit that I really relate to wasting time on my phone. So as a fellow coach, when I saw you'd written a book about how to stop the scroll, I knew I had to interview you. So welcome today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anne. I'm super excited to be here and talk about all things personal growth and getting off our phones.
Love it. So I know you recently completed a hike up Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, 19,341 feet. And I'll be honest, I had to look up what freestanding meant, and that it means the mountain is not part of a mountain range. So I'm so curious, what made you say yes to that hike?
Yeah, and it's special that we're doing this podcast now because it's right about 1 year since we started that climb. So I'm getting flooded with memories and flashbacks of that experience. And so for me, whenever I share the story of how I decided to climb the mountain, people can tend to be a little disappointed because I had a friend who asked if me and my husband wanted to join her on climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and I just said yes. I had no further questions. For me, I had just gotten back from my first trip to Africa to a country called Namibia, and I was just on a high from everything that that country offered and the continent as a whole, and I just loved my time there. So I was aching to find a way to get back to somewhere else in Africa. And so when she presented this idea to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is in Tanzania, I just felt it so deeply in my gut that it was the next challenge for me. I pushed aside all of those little mind gremlins and second thoughts about, you've never backpacked before, and that's a really long hike. You've never done that type of thing before. But I just knew that it was the right thing for me to do, the next big challenge to take on. And I would put in the work to make it happen. And so somebody asked me, and I just said yes, and I made it happen.
I love it. It sounds like you were really being called to adventure, and we're also tapping into that intuitive sense of what was the right adventure for you next.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the funny pieces is, so she asked if my husband and I wanted to join her, and my husband he was physically in the room, but nowhere near us when she asked me, and I just committed him to. I said, yep, he's in too. We're going to make this thing happen. And he was in. He did agree, but I definitely committed him before he knew about what was happening.
And were you already a coach when you took on that challenge to do the mountain?
I was, yeah. So I started my coaching company in the fall of 2021. And so I was about a year in, actually. It was the fall of 2022 when my friend initially asked if we wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And so we took a few months to research different trekking companies and different guide companies to make sure that we were choosing one that treated their team members well and that had responsible and ethical approaches to this type of adventure activity. And so it was a few months after with the idea initially surfaced that we booked our trip. And so I had been a coach for about a year when the decision was made, and then the whole process of training and climbing presented so many opportunities for personal growth, and I learned a lot of lessons for both life and business throughout the training and throughout the expedition itself.
As a fellow coach, I relate to that idea of just because we're coaches doesn't mean there's not a lot of growth that still can't happen.
Absolutely. It's, for me, growth, personal development, self-development, we do not graduate from that work. It is a lifelong commitment to getting better and growing ourselves and expanding our mindsets. If you ever feel like you have arrived at, I am now a personal growth master, that's not what I'm achieving. I'm looking to achieve getting better every single day, little by little. So you're totally right. Just because we're coaches does not mean that we have everything figured out. We're always looking for that opportunity to grow and learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And around that, maybe not, but what was the hardest part of the hike for you?
Oh my gosh, I would say that the hardest part specifically was summit night. So the trek overall was 7 days. We reached the summit on day 6, and then we went down half the mountain the same day we summited and the rest the next day on day 7. But the summit night experience was definitely the hardest physical and mental challenge I have personally been up against. There was a huge storm system that formed on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts, sleet, snow, icy trails. And you start at midnight. So you're hiking in the dark, and it's about 4,000 feet of elevation gain in about 3.5 miles. So it is steep. And the hardest part for me was focusing on the next step. I had several mantras that I repeated to myself over and over and over to keep my mind focused kind of on the task at hand. And I got so focused, I actually entered into a flow state for about 3 hours. And I didn't realize that that had happened until we had taken our first break. And our guide said, "We've been hiking over 5 hours already. We only have a couple to go." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, did I just black out for 3 hours?" Like I was getting a little nervous. But I realized I had put myself into this mental space where I was so focused on the task at hand. I knew I was safe. I could just stay super zoned in and locked in on taking the next right step. And that's something that we can all work a little bit more intentionally on, even in general life, but also in our businesses, is when things are really hard, the next right step. Just focus on the next right step.
Yeah, it sounds like you really were able to tap into that on that trip. That's
Yes.
really cool to hear about 3 hours of flow in what sounds like a really exhausting moment of that mountain.
Yes, absolutely. When we got to the top, we were all so covered in layers of ice that when we did a group hug at the top, we crunched because all the ice was breaking off of
My
us.
goodness.
So it was pretty brutal conditions, but we made it.
Hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like you really were thoughtful about the tour team that you selected. And I'm curious what role, obviously you needed the guides there, but I'm curious what role the guides played for you in that. Were they were they key in motivation? How did they support you on that journey?
Absolutely. And for people who are not super familiar with these type of high altitude, multi-day trekking experiences, it takes a lot of people to support the tourists, which we were, that were coming to do this journey. And so there were 4 of us in our group, my husband and me and 2 of our friends. And for the 4 of us, there were 19 crew members to take care of us 4. We had a lead guide, an assistant guide, a chef, a waiter, someone who managed our private toilet tent, and all of the porters who carried the gear, the tents, the food. So I just want to say that the porters and the guides on Mount Kilimanjaro are truly the heroes of that journey. Without them, no one would reach the top. And so for us, our lead guide, his name is Abu. And Abu has been a guide and a porter on Mount Kilimanjaro for almost 15 years. He has summited Mount Kilimanjaro over 150 times. And so he knew what it takes physically to get there. But one of the, not only was he just the most delightful human being, he was so sweet, so knowledgeable, had the best smile that just made me trust him like almost immediately. He really instilled in us the importance of focusing on the day that we were in. So if it was day 2, we were only focused on what we were accomplishing in day 2. We did not think of summit day, which was on day 6. We stayed really focused on the days that we were in so that we could be present, so that we could really embrace the full experience and all of the different zones, like the climate zones we were climbing through and taking part in like the experience as a whole. So reaching the summit was an amazing achievement, but it was just one of many celebrations and wins that we experienced throughout the whole thing. So the guides are responsible for setting the pace. They're responsible for our stops, making sure we have our food. And then they also took a blood oxygen and heart rate check twice a day. So they wrote down every single reading in the morning and the evening. And then we also had a health sheet where we talked about, were we nauseous? Were we lightheaded? Did we have headaches? And those types of symptoms, so that they tracked our health the whole time. Because with their experience, they can tell, oh, your heart rate is getting pretty high, or your blood oxygen is getting pretty low. Maybe we need to pivot a little bit, go slower, take other breaks. So really, it's actually required by law to have a trekking company to be able to climb in Mount Kilimanjaro National Park. So literally, you can't do it without guides. But also, they are truly the reason that so many of us get to experience the beauty that is Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of support to be supporting you on that journey. So 19 people, fantastic. I don't think this is the right phrase for it, but I hear a little bit of the glamping aspect of the chef with you.
It's sure, you could say it was glamping, but we do have a chef, so they provided us with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as snacks. And so when you think of a chef, it's a single burner and a single pot, and they cook it inside their tent. That chef is also responsible for cooking the food for the rest of the crew. So not only, that was one of his name was Salim. He not only carried equipment as a porter does, but also had the responsibility of cooking for us each night. And we had excellent food. Like, people might think that, oh, you're just eating. Now, granted, there were hot dogs, but people might just think like you're just having bread and hot dogs and things like that. But we had fried chicken. We had a really delicious steak and potatoes meal. We had fresh fruit, eggs every day. But the thing to remember is that all of that food has to be carried by somebody. And then all of the garbage has to be trekked back out. So that's why it's really important to research the guide company that you choose to go with on these types of adventures, because you want to make sure you go with a company that has the porters and the guides' well-being forefront in their minds.
It sounds like with that supportive crew that they really were looking out for every different thing with the blood oxygen and checking the pace for all of you. And it sounds like they really took good care of you.
They did. And just their personalities. And there was a really special time on day 2 after we had reached our camp and we'd gone on another hike to continue to acclimate ourselves to the elevation. And we came back and our whole crew was waiting and they sang in Swahili and we danced as a group. And oh my gosh, it was just, I get, the chills and get a little teary eyed thinking back to that time. It was just so beautiful to really be welcomed into Tanzania and into their culture through their songs. And Swahili is such a beautiful language if you've never heard it. Well, actually, everyone has heard it. If anyone's ever watched The Lion King, Asante Sana literally means thank you. And we say that a lot. And they say Hakuna Matata often too. So everyone is a little bit knowledgeable in Swahili after all. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I got chills as you were describing that too. Sounds like a really special experience.
It was.
If listeners out there are kind of curious about doing this hike, how would they know if they're ready to take it on?
That's a great question. So you have to be interested in being uncomfortable for an extended period of time. While it's not a technical hike, meaning you do not need to be roped in, you do not have to wear a helmet, but it's a very physically challenging climb. You climb, 16,000 feet to get to the top over a few days. I would say for people that are interested in doing it, if you have any desire to see Tanzania and to experience that culture and that kind of trip, I say go for it. Absolutely. Train, take your training seriously, build up your leg strength and your core muscles and practice with your pack and do all of those things. And, too, if people are really interested in it, I did a day by day detailed account of my trip that's on my website and my blog, which I'm sure you'll link to in the show notes. But I did that so that people could kind of see the experience through my eyes and also see themselves in it. I also think it's really important for people to know I live in Colorado, so I already live above 5,000 feet of elevation. I had that benefit. I have the benefit of 14,000 plus foot peaks in Colorado that I can train at. So if you live on sea level and you want to do Kilimanjaro, I would strongly encourage you to make a trip out to the mountains to test yourself at altitude, because it can be tough for some people. But if you have any interest in doing it, I say make a plan, make it happen, take your friends. It is a journey that you won't regret. But just it's a hard journey. It's a challenging journey, and the mountain creates its own weather system, so you don't really know what weather you're going to get. But as they say, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad gear. So make the choice and go prepared.
Love it. I love it. And it might seem like a little bit of a jump to go from talking about doing a very strenuous, exhausting hike to talking about possibly the opposite end of the spectrum, sitting on a couch, endless scrolling on your phone. What's the connection for you?
Yeah. I really think the connection for me is that I've experienced both of those things. As humans, we are multifaceted, we are complex, we can achieve really amazing things for ourselves and experience those highest of highs and the big joys of life. But that doesn't mean we're resistant to those low times. It doesn't mean that sometimes we get sucked in with the weight of the world, maybe the weight of certain challenges that we're going through right now. And I'll speak for myself. Even though I'm a personal growth coach and I have all these tactics and I have this elevated mindset, that doesn't mean that I'm immune to low times. And sometimes I can get sucked into my phone. But there's a way to get yourselves out of it. It just starts with awareness, first of all, and then making a choice to do something different. So that's really the connection, is that I've experienced both.
I know you were inspired to write a book about your experiences at Mount Kilimanjaro. And what brought this book to be the first book that you created after that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I wrote several blog posts about my experience, and I love to write. And I kind of hit this point where I thought maybe people were tired of hearing about my Kilimanjaro experience. And I shared that thought in a women's group. And someone who I ended up hiring to be my book coach said, "I've never heard of it. Everyone in this room did not know that you had that experience. Your story can still be told. It is worthy of continuing to tell it and share it." And so when I hired this book coach, it was her process to start with an activity book. And so I took her experience and her expertise and started launching my book writing career with an activity book. And so kind of the main reasons that I started with an activity book is, one, it gives me the experience of self-publishing and it gets my name out there. So now I'm an author of an activity book. I've self-published my book. I've sold hundreds of copies. I've done it. I've started getting that momentum. And that's where it all started, is with that activity book. And the Stop Doomscrolling theme kind of came to me in the process of creating it. So it wasn't necessarily the intention when I started, but it came to me as I was creating it, and it just felt right. It was another one of those gut feelings of, this feels right, and this is what I'm going forward with.
Yeah. And I feel like it's so relevant right now with how prevalent phones are and how they're both useful and time sucks.
Yes, both
Yeah.
can be true.
Yeah.
Could you use some support in your daily interactions, either for relaxation or a confidence boost? I create a monthly recording that gets you in the frame of mind you're looking for. Maybe that's relaxation and confidence before meeting new people or before an interview, or maybe it's helping you shift away from some negative talk. Join my recordings list at www.betteryour.life/audio. That's .life, not .com.
And I really hearing that, like, getting the ball rolling, and this is like the starting step for you. And you've already got the success of that book publishing under your belt. And I'm curious, what challenges did you run into while creating this book? What was hardest for you around the book?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest challenges was mental. We all have stories to share and things to create and ways to show up in the world. And those little mind gremlins can sneak in every once in a while. And they did while I was creating this book. It was thoughts of, is anybody going to take this seriously?
Mm.
Does anybody really care? Am I doing the right thing? So it was a lot of those limiting beliefs that were creeping in the form of, I like to call them, mind gremlins. And so that was one of the hardest parts of me, was to remember that I chose this goal for a reason. And I still believed in that reason. So recognize that maybe I was having some of those limiting beliefs and then challenge them. Are they actually true?
Mhm.
Replace them with an empowering thought and keep doing the work. Keep showing up for the work. Because when you're consistent and when you keep showing up for your goals, the mind gremlins don't like that. So they don't show up as often when you consistently show up for yourself and for your goals. So I would say that's probably the biggest challenge, was just staying out of my own head and staying super focused.
Yeah, and I'm hearing in whatever we're doing, there's always the possibility of those, whether we're doing a giant hike or creating a book.
Absolutely.
Was that a childhood dream to write a book? Where did that come from?
That's a really great question. So I've always loved to read. I've always been a reader. I wouldn't say that writing a book was a childhood dream. I have wanted to write books, I would say within about the past decade. That goal has really kind of planted itself in me. And I love to write, as I've mentioned. So I have a lot of writing in in my journals and in my storage and things. And for me, I knew that I would write a book, but for a while it's just been a someday thing. The activity book really helped start that momentum. And so continuing to believe that my story is worthy of sharing, as all of ours are, and putting it out there in the best way that I can. So while it wasn't a childhood dream, it's been one that I've had since entering adulthood, we'll say, and I'm excited to start actually turning that into a reality now instead of just a dream.
Yeah, why can't we have adulthood dreams too?
Exactly. We are never too old to dream and to set big goals for ourselves. That's what makes life exciting. Let's have big
hmm
goals and things to look forward to.
hmm Let's do it.
Yes.
And and I hear a little bit of the book is a little bit of a stepping stone to another book, but I'm curious, what is your hope for this book now that it's out there in the world? What's your hope for the Stop Doomscrolling book?
Yeah, I would say my hope for Stop Doom Scrolling, this activity book, is to remind people that life exists outside of our phones. Our phones are tools, as we were saying just a couple moments ago. Our phones are tools and they are full of resources. Also, life is happening all around us, not inside the supercomputer in our hands. And so I really started Stop Doom Scrolling. I alluded to this a little bit ago. While I was creating the book, I was creating, all of the different content within it. And I found myself one evening lying on the couch, doom scrolling. And for those who aren't familiar with the term doom scrolling, essentially it means when you are sucked into either news or social media and you're in this constant state of consumption of primarily bad news, and you just get sucked in and you're doom scrolling to the point where you don't feel any better than when you started. You tend to feel worse and tend to feel a little bit less hopeful than before you started doom scrolling. And so what I was doing, when I caught myself doom scrolling, I thought, "Ugh, I really wish that I had another option. I didn't have enough focus to want to sit and read, but I didn't want to doom scroll my phone. And I just felt like, where's my option?" And I thought, well, it's a good thing I'm creating an activity book that has mazes and puzzles and coloring pages for those times when you want to do something, but you also want to feel a little bit better when you're done. And so that's how the Stop Doom Scrolling came to be, is that moment of realization of, I'm creating a book for me too. And so my hope with this is that when people have that urge to reach for their social media to numb and just doom scroll to pass some time, I just hope that maybe they remember that they have another tool too, and it's the Stop Doom Scrolling activity book. And they can get creative and color, or they can go a little bit deeper into their own thoughts and their own patterns with some of the journal prompts. So it's just about providing people with another option.
I love that. And I really hear in that too is providing something to actually do. It's easy to say, get off your phone, stop doom scrolling, but the challenge is in actually making that choice. And then what else do you do? And like you said, maybe not having the focus to read or the desire to read or, some more redeeming hobbies, if you would. But I love that. I love that shift of here, try this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's all about meeting yourself where you're at and figuring out what works for you. So if you tend to scroll social media right before you go to bed, perhaps one night a week, instead of scrolling social media, you pick up Stop Doom Scrolling and you do a word search. You keep your mind occupied, but you also allow yourself to kind of settle into a slower routine for the evening. So it's just all about it's all about experimentation. Figure out what works for you and what helps you feel happier, more energized, more motivated, a bit more clear of mind. And that's what I hope the book will provide for people.
Love it. And I really heard parallels too with your experience with the doom scroll and then also your hike on Mount Kilimanjaro, like that in one sense you were in flow for 3 hours hiking up this really demanding hike. And just as easily, that could be happening on our phones, right? A different kind
Yeah.
of flow, if you will.
Oh my God, you're so right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I sometimes hear friends or clients who have people in their lives who seem lost to their phones and are stuck in that loop. And I'm curious, of course, we can't change the people around us necessarily, but do you have any recommendations for people who, maybe are thinking of other people who are spending a little too much time on their phones?
Yeah. That's a great question, Anne. And I love that you said we cannot change people. We just cannot. So I would say that one thing to kind of distinguish that I'd love to distinguish for this point is that, again, our phones are tools. So one of the things that you can start with is looking at screen time just to gain some awareness. Now, it's
Mhm.
also important to remember that we use our phones for a lot of things. I personally use my phone to edit my videos for social media, to read my emails, to listen to books, to edit pictures. So I'm doing a lot of things on my phone, including social media. So breaking out the time is important because if you just look at your overall screen time, you're like, oh my gosh, I spent so much time on my phone today. Well, I also drove to a new location that was an hour away, which meant my maps was up for an hour and it recorded an hour of screen time. So it's important to dig into that data a little bit if you're a numbers type of person. Now, if you're someone who has a relationship with someone else in whatever capacity that looks like, and the other person is always on their phone, remember, you can't change anybody. You cannot make anybody change their habits. That's only up to that person. But maybe start with getting curious. Don't be judgmental. Get curious about that habit of, I noticed you're spending a lot of time on your phone. Is everything okay? A lot of people get on their phones to numb. I'm not saying everyone that gets on their phone to scroll is in a low state, but a lot of times we are. Maybe offer other ideas of things to do things together. I think one of the things to remember is that if we want to see a change, we have to be part of the change and we have to take the action. So if we just say to someone, you're spending so much time on your phone, stop spending time on your phone, that's not going to do anything except make that person feel judged and attacked. So
Mhm.
maybe it's more about, hey, would you want to go on a walk this evening after dinner? Maybe we even leave our phones here, or we keep them keep them deep in a pocket so that we can just spend a little time together. Or maybe set some no phone boundaries. I know for my husband and I at the dinner table, our phones are nowhere near us because when they're close by, they're just a distraction. We're all in some way addicted to our phone and the amount of information it can give us. And so I physically put it away, physically put it
Mhm.
farther away. One of the things to remember when you're trying to remove a bad habit is it's not always about removing the bad things, it's about adding in positive things. So if maybe there's more options that need to be added, maybe you need to add puzzles or board games, or maybe instill some sort of board game family night where even if just for an hour, everyone's phones are away. And that includes the adults. As adults, we cannot be angry at the kids for being on their phone all the time if we are also on our phone all the time. That
Mhm.
is not a great example. So, all of that to say, I would just start by getting curious.
Yeah, I love that approach of starting with curiosity. We don't know someone else's story, and phones can be such the default behavior these days, and that can be covering something or it can just be a habit that's developed. I'm also wondering, I know you're also a coach for first-time entrepreneurs. And what's the overlap, if any, between this book and the people you support?
Yeah, I would say the overlap comes in that the people that I support also can have that habit of doom scrolling every once in a while. And that the people that I work with are primarily first time entrepreneurs, but I work with lots of different people. But they all have tons and tons of ideas, and sometimes they can get an analysis paralysis and not do anything that moves themselves and their businesses forward because they default to what feels safe and comfortable, which is our phones and social media sometimes. So, one of the cool things, though, about the activity book is that there are things like journal prompts and there are personal growth exercises in it that I have used with my clients to great success. And so the overlap is really, I wanted to create an activity book that had the fun things, the creative side, the coloring, the mazes, but also opportunities for people to know themselves a little bit better and to create some self-help and personal growth tactics that they can apply to their own lives, no matter who they are or where they are. I've also heard from a lot of people that their teenagers love this book because primarily of the coloring pages and the crossword puzzles, but it's really cool to know that the resources are there in this book. And when people are ready for it, they'll open it. And so that's one of the cool things about the clients that I work with is once they come to me, they are ready to make a change and we really get to work. And so the activity book is just another tool to help people along that journey.
Love it. That reminded me of something I was going to say a moment ago about how I really hear that book as kind of the starting point of a conversation and starting the conversation of how are we spending our time? What are our priorities? Are we avoiding something?
Yeah.
And I love the variety of activities you have in there. It's kind of like what speaks to you in the moment and what do you want to do? And maybe it's crossword or coloring, or maybe it's something deeper, a little more reflective. So I love that variety you have in there.
Yeah.
If you were to impart one piece of wisdom or advice for people taking on that challenge to stop wasting time on their phones, what would it be?
Great question. It all starts with awareness. So I'll go back to what I said a few moments ago about maybe check your screen time. Now, I use an iPhone, so I don't know where this is on Android phones, but I'm sure there is also some type of feature where you can look at your screen time. If you feel like you're wasting too much time on your phone, again, get curious. Don't berate yourself. Don't get super judgmental on yourself because that's going to tend to drive you more into your phone to numb if we are just so hard on ourselves. So it's all about first gain awareness. Identify where you are spending the most time on your phone. I know for me, I love Instagram. Instagram is a place where I can get sucked into sometimes. So for me, I set time limits. That's a really good place to start. Start with a time limit. And when that time limit shows up and pops up on your screen and closes the app, you then have an option. Do you hold that boundary and close out the app for the rest of the day? Or do you choose to ignore it and continue to engage with the app? It's just a point of friction that you can add into your use of any type of app. That's a bit of it's just a layer of friction. So you can think, oh, I've already hit my limit for today. Okay. I can choose to engage with it or not. So that would be my first piece of advice would be just gain awareness on where you're at with it. And then second, find something else to reach for in those moments. So Stop Doomscrolling, the activity book, is a great option for that. It could also be a puzzle or a game so that when you have that urge to reach for your phone to do nothing of importance, you have another option. But so set yourself up for success. Actually, one of the activities in the activity book is called a self-care menu. And it's all about identifying things that you know make you feel happier, more joyful, more productive, or things in certain moments. So the whole point of the self-care menu is when you feel, let's say, frustrated, you know your default of what you go do when you're frustrated. But the point of this little self-care menu is to think ahead of, okay, I know when I feel frustrated, what tends to make me feel better is listening to this song or taking a walk outside or enter X, Y, and Z, make a cup of hot tea. You go ahead and plan that out for your future self. so that when you do get frustrated in the future, or you feel angry, or you feel lonely, or whatever, your past self has already set you up for success by providing you with a list of other options.
So many great ideas packed in that answer there. I love the different variety of options you provided there, Michelle, for starting. And with that, so many different ways that people can get into ways to stop spending so much time on their phone. I know you have another book coming on the horizon too. What can you tell us about that one?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, I've always wanted to write books for the past decade or so. So, this next book that I'm working on is in the personal growth realm. And it's all about the lessons and insights from the Mount Kilimanjaro experience. And so think about it as a personal growth book with tactics and lessons that can be applied to both life and business set upon the canvas of the Mount Kilimanjaro climb. So there'll be specific examples from the training, the year-long training that I went through in order to prepare for the hike, as well as the actual experience of being on it, and all of the insights that I realized through reflection and through really processing the experience. So my hope for this next book is that people will find it relatable and they will find ways to apply these lessons that I learned on Africa's tallest peak, but that can be applied to everyday life no matter where you live.
So continuing that personal growth theme, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Always trying to get a little bit better. And I find that it's my responsibility to take the experiences that I have in life and pull out the insights and lessons for other people to be able to learn from my experiences as I continue to learn from them. So I do everything I can to pull those big lessons out of seemingly small moments. So I'm excited to continue doing that with this next book.
I'm excited to read it. Any date yet planned for release?
Not yet. Still in the writing phase. And, the publishing world is one that comes with a lot of different caveats and timelines. So you'll definitely be the first to know when I have a published date.
Awesome. I hope we can have you back here when that comes
Absolutely. I would
out.
love to. Yeah,
Looking forward to it. So, as we close out, where can listeners find you and your work?
absolutely. So my social medias that I partake in are Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So on all of those platforms, it's Michelle Gruening. My website is michellegruening.com. So if you type my name in just about everywhere, you will be directed to my online presence. So my website also has links out to all of the podcasts that I've been guests on, as well as a link to purchase my book, Stop Doomscrolling, which is exclusively on Amazon. And yeah, come follow along on social media. I love to share personal growth tips, insights on mindset, habits, life. You'll also see my dog and a hike or two here and there. So I am excited to make some new friends and new connections.
I'm so excited to be following you in all those places as well. And for anybody who's tapping that in right now, that's Michelle Gruening, GRUENING.com. All right. Well, I invite our listeners to pick up a copy of Stop Doomscrolling, Get Off Your Phone and Back to Living Your Life. And I want to thank you, Michelle. This has been a really inspirational interview. And I am really looking forward to hearing how you inspire our listeners to do whatever challenge might be on their horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you and to share a bit of insight and experience with your listeners. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Books to Better Your Life. If you could use some support on your own personal growth journey, please reach out. I'm an ICF certified life coach, and I help my clients with habits, mindset, confidence, and making what they want happen. I'm Anne Brinkman, and you can find me at www.betteryour.life. That's .life, not .com. Choose the contact option to send me a message and schedule a chat.